Let me guess. You understand the concept of mediation and you know what it's about, but every time you have to do a mediation activity, you go blank and you don't know where to start from. Am I right? Don't worry, I got you covered. Today I will show you an example of a mediation activity and we will do it together. Let's begin. So here we are, we're gonna do a mediation task together for the C1 level. This one is called parenting mistakes. So let me show you what you need to do. These are the instructions of the activity that we're gonna read together. It says, the other day you received an email from your Irish sister-in-law, Louise, and she says, hi there, I'm totally overwhelmed with your teenage nephew, Mark. We've been fighting a lot lately, and despite having everything, he complains and he's never satisfied. He also blames me for taking him to a lot of extracurricular activities, but I do believe that it's the best for his future. I'm afraid that when I lose my temper, I'm very judgmental and I just tell him off, but that doesn't seem to work either. I'm desperate for help. So reply to Louise, giving her some tips on how to avoid the parenting mistakes she's making based on this leaflet below. We're going to check that in the next page. And you need to write about 120 words, okay? So let me show you the real leaflet and you will need to use it to give the reply to Louise. So this is the leaflet on the left-hand side, okay, with a few tips that we're going to read now. And by the way, if you want to first watch my video about mediation in 10 simple steps, you can click on the screen now, okay? I'll wait for you. Now, these are the 6 tips that the leaflet has, okay? So I'm gonna give you a few seconds to stop the screen if you want and read them carefully. And don't worry, I won't go anywhere. Okay, ready? Now that you have read all the different tips, remember, in mediation it's very important to select the relevant information only, and only the information that has to do with the problem that this person has. So the question is, which ones have you decided are relevant? Which out of the 6 tips are the most important tips? Let me see what your thoughts are, and let me see if we agree on this. Now, for me, the most relevant tips that you need to decide are these 3. Number 1, number 2, and number 4. I hope that you agree with me, and we're gonna begin now developing our mediation activity. Now, we need to begin, of course, with an introduction. But before we begin any introduction in any mediation activity, we need to think of the tone. Since she's your sister-in-law, obviously, we're going to use an informal, colloquial tone. And that's why with the greeting, we're going to say something like, hi, sweetie, which is quite informal. The next thing you need to mention is kind of acknowledge the problem, okay? Say something that references or mentions the problem that this person has. So don't start straight away giving the tips, but perhaps say something like, as a mom of a teen, I know where you're coming from. Now, let's analyze a little bit this vocabulary. Pay attention, because instead of repeating the word teenager, okay, I have used a synonym, for example, teen, so that, you know, it's a little bit more mixed and I'm showing a bigger or a wider variety of vocabulary. And also, instead of saying the typical, I know how you feel or I understand how you feel, you can say something like, I know where you're coming from, which is a very nice expression for expressing exactly the same thing. Now, let's move on now to the source of your information. It's important, if you can, if the word limit allows you to do it, to mention where you found this information, okay? To make reference of the leaflet. So for example, you can say something like, yesterday I stumbled upon a leaflet about parenting mistakes, so hopefully it might help you, okay? You can use something like this. Now, instead of using the verb and the typical boring verb, I saw, for example, yesterday I saw a leaflet, blah, 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 we're gonna use the phrasal verb to stumble upon, which means the same thing. I saw by mistake this leaflet, okay? So try to use these advanced synonyms to show your level. So now let's begin with tip number 1. On the right-hand side, you can see the actual tip that appears on the leaflet, and now version or the text that we can write. So for example, the tip was that you shouldn't give in to your teens every whim, granting them access to every new idea, dream, video game, tech piece, or clothing trend. So you can say something like, okay, avoid spoiling him, satisfying every demand. The more you give him, the less he'll appreciate anything. Instead, be strict. Easier said than done, but totally worth it. Okay, now let's analyze that first paragraph we just wrote. First of all, in blue, you can see that I highlighted the words spoiling and demand. Okay, I'm doing this because in the original leaflet appears the expression don't give in to his whims. So basically, another way of saying the same thing is avoid spoiling him. And also, instead of using the exact word whims, you can use the word demand. Again, mediation is a very good opportunity to show all the synonyms that you know, to not repeat the actual words that appear on the original leaflet. Now, regarding grammar, we have this fantastic grammatical structure, which is the more, or in this case, the more, the less. So you can say the more you give him, the less he'll appreciate anything. And I really cannot recommend this structure enough, okay? Because it's so flexible and basically you can use it in every single context. The more, or the more, the less. Now, what else do we have? We have the beautiful expression easier said than done. Instead of saying, well, I know it's difficult, but you can use the expression, well, it's easier said than done. Es muy fácil decirlo, okay? But pay attention because I have omitted the subject. I haven't written it is easier said than done. I simply put easier said than done. Why? Because you need an informal tone. You are writing to your sister-in-law, so you need to give it a colloquial touch. That's why we omit the subject. So don't worry, it's not bad grammar, it's just grammar that reflects the tone of your text. Now let's move on to tip number 2. And tip number 2 was about you work to always keep them busy. Okay, you overstuff their schedule, especially with activities they're not really interested in, and that can backfire. So giving them space to find new hobbies might be a better catalyst. So on the left again, let's have a look at the alternative text, at the suggestion. You can say something like, besides, if I were you, I would try not to overload their timetable with activities chosen by you. Have you tried asking him what he's really into? It works wonders, right? So let's analyze again what we have just done there. Now, regarding grammar again, you want to show your beautiful grammar, and here is an example of a second conditional, very typical to give advice. So of course, if I were you, I would do blah, blah, blah. We also have a passive structure. So again, in the grammar structures, we are showing a nice variety of grammatical structures. So the activities chosen by you, that's another example of a passive structure. We have, in terms of connectors, the connector besides. So you are starting the second tip with the connector besides, which is perfect to introduce new ideas. And now we also have chosen, or we have used, different expressions in terms of vocabulary. So instead of using the original word overstuffing, I have chosen to overload their timetable, which means basically the same. Instead of saying like, have you tried asking him what he likes, which would be a very plain way to say that, we can use the expression to be into something, which means what things or what interests does he like. Okay, so have you ever tried asking him what he's really into? So remember that expression as a synonym for to like something. And finally, instead of saying it works well, you can use the expression it works wonders. Okay, it works wonder, again, is a beautiful, fantastic expression that will help boost your vocabulary a little bit. I have marked here the expression, have you ever tried asking him? Okay, so the structure have you tried plus ing, okay, it's used for suggesting or proposing ideas. So again, remember that you also have to show a wide variety of functional language. What do we say, or what do you use to give advice? What do you say to give your opinion? What do you say to suggest ideas? Okay, so this is another example of a functional language structure. Okay, now let's move on to tip number 3. And tip number 3 was about to be hypocritical of your team's mistakes. It says focus on helping your team rather than just being critical of their mistakes. If you constantly point out their flaws, they will start to lose sight of their strength. So on the left-hand side, you have again an example of something you can say, and it goes, plus, try not to be judgmental towards your team. We are meant to be their support system, not constantly criticizing them. I mean, let's be real. We've all messed up in the past, haven't we? Hang in there though. I hope this does the trick. So let's analyze this last paragraph and see what we have done here in terms of vocabulary, grammar, functional language, and connectors. Now, the first connector that we have used is plus, and plus again is similar to besides that we used in the previous tip. However, it's a little bit more informal, so it really goes well in this context. So remember to use it. What do we have? We have, for example, the word judgmental, and in the original leaflet it says hypocritical or critical. So instead of repeating the word critical, we are using a synonym which is judgmental. All right. What else? Instead of saying we are meant to help them, because in the original test it says focus on helping your teen, we're going to use, a different paraphrased way of expressing the same idea. So we are meant to be their support system. Another different way to use to express the same thing. And also we have a passive structure. We are meant to be. We are meant to be. So this is a nice passive structure, to break a little bit the simplicity of the language and show our level. We also have, in terms of grammar, a question tag, which are wonderful if you are using an informal language. Okay, so you have said an affirmative sentence. We've all messed up in the past. Okay, by the way, to mess up means to make a mistake. Okay, but a little bit informal. And then at the end, you introduce a question tag by using the auxiliary in the negative, because in the main sentence is positive. So haven't we? And also there is a fantastic, brilliant connector, which is though, and though is a little bit more informal than although. And then you need to use it at the end of a sentence. So hang in there, though. So basically, though introduces the contrast, saying, well, although this is all very difficult and everything, hang in there. All right. But if you use hang in there, though, you are showing your knowledge of informal language, and it's great. We also have the beautiful expression to do the trick. Okay, instead of saying, and this is very typical, no, how we end mediation activities. Okay, I hope it helps. I hope this does the trick. I hope this does the trick. Okay, so it's a nice way to say the same thing. All right, so here we are. This was the example of a mediation activity, and we did it together. So as you can see, mediation is not that terrible. All you need to do is keep on practicing. And why not? Just watch my other mediation videos to give you a hand. See you soon.